Archaeological investigations, both terrestrial and underwater, have been conducted at the Spring Lake site for a number of years since the 1970s. Altogether, the results of this work have produced an increasingly complete picture of the overall extent, nature, and timing of prehistoric and protohistoric occupation at this important site. With deposits dating over 13,000 years ago and extending up until the arrival of Spanish explorers in the early 1500s, the Spring Lake site has been referred to by archaeologists as the longest continuously inhabited location in North America. Today I would like to discuss our current investigations at the Spring Lake site and the primary goals and research objectives that guide our work. I will also be presenting some of our findings so far. Spring Lake is located at the base of the Balcones Escarpment in south-central Hays County. The lake is fed by a large artesian outflow of about 200 springs that come up from the Edwards Aquifer, forming the headwaters of the San Marcos River. The lake is actually an artificial lake that was created in 1849 when General Edward Burleson built a dam across the river about 1/2 mile downstream from the springs. Burleson commanded the 1st Regiment at the Battle of San Jacinto in 1836 and helped to establish the city of San Marcos in 1851. The Balcones Escarpment marks the boundary between the Edwards Plateau, which is what we know of as the Hill Country, and the Blackland Prairie. The Central Texas region, specifically this region along the eastern edge of the Central Texas region, is where two large-scale environmental provinces come together. It's an area that's capable of supporting tremendous fauna and flora diversity in addition to dense human occupations in the past. The region is also characterized by numerous archaeological deposits and multi-component sites. The San Marcos Springs have attracted human populations for over 13,000 years. They were known to the early European settlers as St. Mark's, which is where the city of San Marcos got its name from. It was known to the Tonkawas as Kano Kana Yesetetlo, which means warm water. And today it is known as the Meadow Center for Water and the Environment, formerly Ocarina Springs. Interestingly, the Indigenous Cultures Institute identifies the area as a sacred site, and they refer to it as the Sacred Springs. The largest cluster of archaeological deposits and multi-component sites is located around San Marcos Springs. You can see here on this map 6 different sites that have been recorded. Although they have been recorded as separate sites, they actually represent a single extensive complex of archaeological deposits associated with the springs that form Spring Lake. This was confirmed in 2010 when Principal Investigator Carol Leeser directed an intensive archaeological survey and subsurface testing investigations for the Spring Lake Aquatic Restoration Project. So these sites are referred to collectively as a Spring Lake site. Work has been conducted on and off these sites for a number of years, beginning in the late 70s. This table to the left illustrates a chronology that was developed by Elton Pruitt in 1981 for Central Texas. This chronology is the most commonly used for our region. The prehistoric period covers the vast majority of the time span of human presence and is divided into Paleo-Indian, Archaic, and late prehistoric subperiods. The combined archaeological evidence from the history of work at Spring Lake shows that all the major periods listed in this regional chronology are present at Spring Lake. And as a condensed background to our current investigations, I want to talk about 2 of the more recent and significant excavations. Beginning with Dr. Bausman's field schools in 2001, 2002, 2003, and 2006. These field schools consisted of data recovery excavations in the Pecan Grove area adjacent to what at the time was a parking lot. The first field school began shortly after a testing project in 2001 determined the potential for stratified and intact buried deposits at the site. These field school excavations were considered necessary to mitigate the loss of information anticipated from unavoidable impacts associated with the proposed construction of the Texas River Center. Recovered lithic material included groundstone, modified flakes, bifaces, cores, core tools, unifaces, and projectile points. Based on the recovery of chronologically diagnostic materials, the earliest deposits occurred during the early Archaic period. The depth of this cultural period was at the time unknown because it is located below the termination of excavation. The Middle Archaic is by far the best represented cultural period in the block, but as our current investigations are showing us, The early Archaic was not fully sampled, so the results may actually be skewed. Over 19,000 fragments of faunal remains, 121 pieces of shell, and 29 ceramics were also collected. A detailed analysis of the artifact assemblage collected during the 2001, 2002, 2003, and 2006 field schools began in 2010 under the direction of Dr. John Lose, and CAS is currently working on publishing these results. A primary objective of Dr. Lose's research and contribution of the report we are working on is an emphasis on understanding the chronological sequence of the immediate Spring Lake area and relating this chronology to broader patterns of cultural and ecological change through time. Dr. Lose sought to refine certain parts of the record in order to better reflect new data from Spring Lake, as well as better associations between important artifact styles and absolute dates across greater central Texas. Specifically, his research was focused on characterizing the Middle Archaic period. Although intact Middle Archaic deposits are difficult to find within the central Texas region, they are relatively extensive here at Spring Lake. From 2011 to 2012, Texas State University built a new ticket kiosk and restroom facility at Spring Lake within the boundaries of the Spring Lake site. The facility was planned to replace the former visitor center at Ocarina Springs, which was demolished during the Spring Lake Aquatic Ecological Restoration Project. Working with the university's Office of Facilities Planning, Design, and Construction at Texas State University, the Center for Archaeological Studies designed and carried out a plan for data recovery and archaeological monitoring in order to recover information representative of the archaeological record in the immediate area, and that would offset the loss of additional information stemming from the construction of the ticket kiosk. The primary goal of our mitigation measures was to acquire a high-quality data set that would contribute to a better understanding of prehistoric occupations at Spring Lake. And in order to achieve a significant data set, our objectives were aimed at recovering stratified, time diagnostic material. An interrelated objective was to recover datable organic materials from primary contexts, either associated with features or from clearly identifiable stratigraphic units. 2 1-by-1 meter units were excavated in the proposed location of the lift station. At 150 centimeters below surface, the units were mechanically stepped out in all directions for safety. The water table was encountered at approximately 240 centimeters below surface, but it came in slow enough for us to bail it out and dig deeper. So we continued excavating by hand through the mud to a depth of 300 centimeters below datum. This is the deepest well-controlled excavation yet conducted at the Spring Lake site. Excavations and monitoring for the Ticket Booth project documented the record of prehistoric occupation at Spring Lake almost continuously from the end of the late prehistoric period into the early Archaic. And just when we thought we were into sterile soil, we found this early Archaic Gower point that had been reworked into a drill. Considering the continuous nature of deposits here, the emphasis of our analysis was placed on generating a robust record of radiocarbon dates for certain key intervals and components. A primary contribution of this project is what appears to be an intact terminal early Archaic Calf Creek component, just less than 6,000 years old. The Calf Creek horizon is noteworthy for its close association with Middle Holocene bison exploitation. It is characterized by a widespread series of cultural traits that have been identified across the southern Great Plains and adjoining areas of Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Typologically, dart points found in Texas that comprise the Calf Creek style include Bell and Andice. These points are characterized by triangular bodies with deep basal notches that result in long barbs and typical square stems. In addition to securely placing Calf Creek in the regional chronological sequence, the monitoring efforts at the ticket booth resulted in the discovery, documentation, and removal of a single human burial. This interment represents the third human burial to have been recovered from the Texas State campus and is the seventh individual recovered by CAS from the general San Marcos area. Although Pruitt's chronology remains in common use for the region, Dr. Lose's research at Spring Lake has resulted in a revised chronological model for greater central Texas, spanning the end of the early Archaic to the beginning of the late prehistoric Toya interval, which is a period encompassing more than 5,000 years. This revised model of refined dates from the available data from the field school excavations and the ticket booth data recovery project, including bison dates, a sample of suitable radiocarbon dates for Middle Archaic diagnostics, and a depositional model of site formation from Spring Lake. These revisions provide the basis of the current project. In June of this year, CAS began a new terrestrial investigation at the Spring Lake site, and this project is called the Spring Lake Data Recovery Project. It's an off-site data recovery investigation that was designed to mitigate some unavoidable impacts made to a different site near Crooks Park in San Marcos. Our goal has been to excavate 40 cubic meters of archaeological sediment, as well as subsequent analysis of the recovered materials and also dissemination of the results by way of creating an online portal. There are 3 research domains that will be addressed. The first, again, is chronology and culture-historical reconstruction. The second is geoarchaeology, site formation, and environmental reconstructions. And also, the third research domain that will be addressed is to better define the Calf Creek horizon at Spring Lake, including its technological characteristics and how subsistence-related behaviors changed during this brief interval of big game bison hunting at the end of the early Archaic, around 5,750 to 6,000 years ago. Calf Creek is a narrow interval spanning about 6,000 to 5,750 years ago, and this component has been encountered in 2 separate excavations at Spring Lake, but it has never been fully sampled. Intact deposits dating to this period are exceedingly scarce in Central Texas, and we anticipate that our current work will make a significant contribution to the understanding of this period in the regional record. We started by opening up the old field school block and excavating 4 new 1x1 units along the southwest wall. In total, we have opened up a 4x4 meter block immediately against the south wall of Dr. Bausman's 3x4 meter field school block. We built a ramp of sandbags down into our new block starting at the north wall of Dr. Bausman's field school block. We took the entire 4x4 down to 130 centimeters below datum, which is approximately even with Dr. Bausman's floor. We then stepped in a meter and took a 3x2 meter block down to 200 centimeters below datum. And at the very middle of this 3x2, we took a single 1x1 down to 300 centimeters below datum. We have used the TDS to point provenience and all recognizable tools, including utilized flakes and projectile points, also bone and charcoal that have been recovered in situ or in place. We have 677 point provenienced items so far. A 2-liter soil sample has also been collected from approximately the middle of every 10 centimeter level. We have had to water screen much of the sediment, but when possible we dry screen it first to reduce the amount of sediment and artifacts that are being sent to the water screen. Both our wet and dry screens are 1/4 inch mesh. We encountered the water table at almost exactly 200 centimeters below datum. We have opened a second 3x3 meter block, 9 meters east and 1 meter south of the main block, and the plan for that block is to take it down to 130 centimeters below datum and then punch the middle 1x1 meter unit down to 230 centimeters below datum. In total, we have 26 units. We have made quite an effort to keep up with the processing of large amounts of material coming in from the field each day. We are washing, sorting, and we have even started cataloging the artifacts. We have employed a cast of experienced undergraduate and graduate students, and one thing we're all learning how to do is identify Calf Creek projectile points and point fragments. This is a poster we have up in our lab, which pertains to our main research objective for this project, which is to learn more about the Calf Creek horizon at Spring Lake. So, as we are sorting all of the lithic artifacts, or stone artifacts, we are keeping an eye out not only for the complete projectile points, but also for the stems, the barbs, and also some notching flakes. Recent research by Sergio Ayala with the Galt School of Archaeological Research has actually demonstrated that certain notching flakes are just as diagnostic of an andice point as the complete specimen is itself. Despite our diligent efforts with the lab work, we still have a lot of work ahead of us just to even be able to produce a completed database for our analyses. So we have also started welcoming volunteers to help us keep up. Also, students from my curation class are even helping out and gaining valuable experience while doing that. Here is a table of recovery from just 2 units down to level 11 out of the 19 levels, just to give you an idea of the results so far. In excavation unit 22, we have 5 projectile points, and in 23 we have 7 projectile points. And in all of these categories, I've made an average and projected an amount of these categories if we were to calculate it by each 1 by 1 meter unit in the 4 by 4 meter block. As you can see, we will have a lot of debitage. We will also have a lot of burned rock and faunal bone to curate. So now I want to show you some pictures of artifacts that have been recovered from our current work out at Spring Lake. Here we have a Perdiz arrow point, which is a late prehistoric arrow point. This is a Castroville point that has been reworked into a drill, and Castroville projectile points date to the late Archaic. Another late Archaic point we have found is the Pedernales. We actually have quite a few Pedernales points coming out of our excavations. And here are some examples of a Middle Archaic projectile point. We have a Nolan and a Travis, and then also we have quite a bit of Early Archaic triangular points. This specimen might be a Bell projectile point. There is some debate about whether or not this point of entry here at the bottom is too wide to be a Bell, or it might just be a manufacturing error. Either way, this specimen does represent an early archaic basally notched point, and therefore we can associate that technology, which is Calf Creek technology, again with Spring Lake, and we will just have to wait and see what the radiocarbon dates tell us about the age of the deposit it came from. We also have some typological outliers, like this specimen. Although it is complete enough to theoretically identify a type, it actually does not compare with any previously defined type categories. We have actually found a few of these at the Spring Lake site. They have a square stem, corner notching, and convex lateral edges. The blade is also beveled, which is a characteristic of some early archaic types. These specimens seem to represent either stylistic elaboration or maybe even experimentation during the latter part of the early Archaic. We have also recovered a variety of biface forms in a variety of reduction stages. This bifacial knife has 4 beveled edges, making it a diamond beveled knife. These tools were likely used for cutting meat and plant foods and were often reused and resharpened many times throughout their use lives. Without exact numbers or data yet, we have observed that there are clear peaks in burned rock between 80 and 100 centimeters below datum, and also 290 to 300 centimeters below datum. This is likely an indication of increased site use and subsidence intensification. There are sporadic clusters of burned rock between these 2 peaks, but in nowhere near the concentrations. We have also recovered bone, modified bone, and also shell artifacts. Here we have a bone awl tool. We also have some bone beads, both cylindrical and discoidal in shape. Some of these might even be marine shell, and we will know for sure once they are cleaned and looked at under a microscope. We did have a marine shell columella bead from the Ticket Booth excavations, interestingly from within the Calf Creek component, so it would not be unlikely to find more marine shell beads. We have also recovered the most ceramics from our current investigations than from any other excavations at Spring Lake. Following the CTA guidelines for ceramics, we will examine the paste morphology using both macroscopic and petrographic analysis. We can already determine that a good portion of the fragments have bone temper, which is a hallmark of Toya pottery. Toya is a designation referring to a unique set of tools and techniques used by several late prehistoric Native American groups between approximately 1300 and 1600 AD. In fact, beveled knives are also considered a major category in stone toolkits. And the majority of the bone temper ceramics came from our new 3x3 excavation block, which is also where the beveled knife came from, and the Perdiz arrow point. So we think we have an intact Toya component there. Collectively, the data gathered during the course of our excavations will undoubtedly contribute to the ongoing improved understanding of prehistoric occupation at Spring Lake and in the upper San Marcos River Valley, and will perhaps even serve eventually as a model of culture change against which other researchers in Central Texas may compare their own findings. Thank you.